good to join you again today. Today we're going to be doing a little bit different project. We're going to be sewing a face mask, especially with all the things that are going on these days. Everybody's required to wear face masks, children, everybody. So today I thought rather than a usual jewelry project, we'd work on something a little different and make our own masks. Obviously we need a pattern, we need fabric, our scissors, a couple of pieces of elastic, and needle and thread. And the reason we're doing it this way is because not everybody has a sewing machine, but this is something that everybody can do. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure that we get our needle and thread put together. Everybody go ahead and take your time to get that done. Some of you will find it easier to have a little item that helps you thread things. In this case, for me, the fun part would be trying to find where the thread begins. So now that I've got that, there are a lot of different stitch variations that you can use on this. I'll show you a couple of examples as I go along, so mine will not be the same the whole way around. But you pick the stitch that works best for you. A straight stitch is one of them. It's a very simple stitch. Another one's called a blanket stitch. And the reason I use these two different kinds is one, some of us will be using a fabric that does not fray. It's a lot easier to work with. Others of us are going to be using a fabric that might fray a little bit. Those are the ones that the blanket stitch works good on. It kind of puts an edge on things. And I'm going to not take and just thread this whole thing all at once to do the whole thing, because you're going to end up with a piece of thread that gets multiple knots in it. You're going to be continuously pulling your thread out, starting over again, clipping it off at this knot, different things like that. So we're going to just use a shorter piece to start with. I'm rolling a knot into the end of my thread here. And some of you are seamstresses, some of you have been sewing your whole lives, and this may seem like kind of a monotonous thing to be saying, but there are others out there who do not and have not ever sewn. And for that reason, we're going to go over each item as we go along. I like to use the top of my yarn or my thread to kind of hold that. I got what they call fat quarters and that at the Walmart to work with this. And I had a little piece of this bunny fabric left over. You can use, again, any fabric that you choose. The most important thing is they're going to want to be able to cut on this particular pattern. You're going to need 4 of this pattern cut out. You're going to put 2 pieces together for the front and 2 pieces together for your back piece. The way we're going to stitch it today, it's going to leave it open on one end at least. Some of you will want to leave it open on both ends. Just a personal preference. And that is so if you decide you want to put a coffee filter, a little piece of another fabric, a t-shirt fabric in the center of it as an additional piece of filter, that you can do. We're just going to make the front and the back of it with this fabric. I'm going to take my quarter, open it up, this little piece here out of there. All my bunnies are going one direction on one side and the other on the other. So let's see how I want to do this. I want everybody going the same direction. So I'm going to cut this fabric down the center. Now, if I was being very economical, I would not be just cutting right down the middle of the fabric. I would be laying this out a little more carefully so that I would be able to use more of my fabric. So, you want to make sure you go with the grain of your fabric up and down this direction. You can easily find your grain by looking for your salvage edge. The salvage edge will be the completed edge, or the edge that you can see little dots where the fabric was actually in the loom at the manufacturer's. That's going to be up and down. I'm going to take and cut out my pattern. On the pattern here, you can see that I put dimensions for you. And that this particular one, I've made a grid. And any of you that want this, you can definitely call me. I'm more than happy to make one for you if you'd like. Just stop by and pick one up. Quite easily to do. And that this has 3 1/4 inches this direction and 3 3/4 this direction. And this is allowing for the 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that these dimensions do. So let's start off. And this is an average adult's mask. You can downsize it a little bit if you have a child, or you could take it up if you have a little bit larger face that you're needing to work with. And I found that a little bit larger works for gentlemen with beards. Some of you are going to have pins that you can put this with. Others of you will not have pins, and that you might have clothespins, and you can put that around the edge. That'll help you hold it in place. So my little bunnies are all going the same direction. My grain of fabric is the same direction, and because I need 4 pieces all going the same way, I'm going to put this on here just like this. And I can have my bunny going down this way. Smooth that out for me. I don't have my pins with me, so I'm just going to take a couple of needles that I have extra here. Needles aren't easy to work with because they don't have a tip for us to easily pull pin in and out with. I'm just going to put a couple on here to help me guide. Others of you will not have any pins. You won't want to do it this way, and this is why I put the Sharpie out here, because if it's something that you're not worried about it bleeding, you can always draw around your pattern and draw it out on each piece separately if you'd like. So for this, we're going to go ahead and just cut this out. Pins out of there. So I'm going to turn this one so that you can see. On this one, I actually had added and sewn in a little liner. I want you to get an idea of what the inside of this is going to look like. Along this bottom edge here, you can see this is what we call the blanket stitch. This is our straight stitch right here. These are straight stitch. And on this end down here, I just made sure that at the end I folded it over. You can go either way. So we're going to start this by first doing our center pieces. Put right sides together. Again, feel free to use pins on this if you'd like to hold it in place. If you're going to use a pin, just put it along this edge here. Again, this is the center of the front. And we're going to sew this on both pieces, just down this front piece. Needle and thread, starting your straight stitch through the fabric and back out again. Now there are ways to do this, which you can make the stitch just go straight along, and I'll show you that as we do this. Just in and out. There are some people who the fabric will be very easy to work with, and you'll just decide, oh, I'll do 2 or 3 stitches at a time. That's perfectly all right. If you want to go in and out 2 or 3 times and pull it through. Sometimes I get a little bit ouchy in my hands, and so I'm not always able to do 2 or 3 at a time, or the fabric doesn't want to give. But this right here is an example of what I say, do 2 or 3 at a time. And I'm going to pull that through. If you would like, you can take and stitch a back stitch and then a forward stitch to give more strength to this. And when I say a back stitch, as I've gone along my stitching, I'll take my needle in and put it in behind where it last came out, and I'll push it back through again. And then again, I'll put it in behind where my needle came out before and put it back in again. And each time I do that, I'm adding a little bit more reinforcement to that stitched area. And you see that back here I have more spaces, but here the spaces are a little tighter together. So that's giving me a little bit tighter stitch. As I told you, I'll just give you an example. If you decide you would like to do more of a blanket stitch, you know, put your needle this direction, come up at your hemline, or your seam line, pardon me, and you're going to have the needle, the thread on the back side as you pull it up. And you see how that kind of catches like that. Well, it did that. It also wrapped a stitch around the top here. So I'm going to put this back in again. Do that again. On the back side, you're just getting a single stitch. On the front side, this. So it depends on how you want to do it. Whatever's the simplest for you. And round we go. I'm going to go back to our straight stitch, because that is how I would prefer to finish this off. And again, we're just going to run our stitch down here. Go ahead and finish your stitch line as you're most comfortable. Let me get this needle out of there. Make it multiple stitches, make it single stitches, whatever you're comfortable with. Now some of you will have a sewing machine. That's all right. Use your sewing machine if you don't want to hand stitch. It's perfectly all right. This is kind of so that everybody can get involved, even those of us who didn't have a sewing machine at home or just don't want to drag it out. Trying to clear a little knot that formed there. had a lot of folks that called in and were very excited to be able to do this and see how it was done that didn't know how. And today it seems that our masks are part of our everyday wear. So now I've tied a little knot at the end here. Nip that off. Another knot, and I'm going to go ahead and do the other piece the same as I did this one. Again, we're just going to put right sides together. If by chance you get partway through and you run out of thread, it's okay. Just tie your knot off. Tie that thread off right where it is. Thread up another piece and continue on. Now that we're tied off, I'm going to go ahead and rethread. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put front to back. Now, I know for some folks threading can be a problem. I know if I didn't have my glasses on, it would be uncomfortable for me. And if the eye of this needle wasn't as large, it would also be more uncomfortable. And I find that sometimes if you don't have a needle threader, if you just take a tiny piece of paper, a little strip of paper, as long as that eye of the needle can accommodate that width, you slide that little piece of paper double through there, slide that thread into that paper, and you can pull it through. Again, I'm putting an extra little knot in there. And let's nap this again. We're doing our pieces together. Now we have that little cup. We're going to take right sides again. I'm going to fold this one back in so that it cups into this one. And again, if you have the pins, go ahead and pin around the edge. I'm going to start on my bottom seam, making sure that the two seams are lined up, gathering out to the end here, and I'll start my stitch here. And again, at about 1/4 inch for me. And I'm going to not stitch the ends, I'm just going to stitch the top and the bottom. Again, I'm going to tie this off. Once you've done that one side, now we're going to go up here. In this case, I started at the bottom seam. I'm going to do the top seam next. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to be making larger stitches than I would normally do. Tie it down, get rid of that little end piece. I'm going to make sure that my centers right together there. And then all the way down to the end. Put that together. And if you notice it's hanging over just a little bit here, for whatever reasons, either the fabric shifted, I cut a little bit extra. That's why we start with our center seam and bring it all the way to the edge to get our start. Be sewn in place. So you always want to make sure that that's nice and smoothed out for you. And by the looks of my thread, I'm probably going to have to re-thread here before I get to the end. As I told you, if that happens, don't worry about it. Tie it off and just get another piece of thread, continue on. And knowing that's going to happen, I'm going to make sure it's all smooth. Pick this spot right here to tie it off. And when I tie off, if you notice, I take a little clip through the fabric, go back through that, so I hold that, and I pull it. There, make it snug. And one more time. And that ties a nice little knot for me. Hopefully it's easy for you to see my stitching on here so that you'll see kind of approximately how far in I've gone. Again, we're working with a straight stitch. Just start right back up again. So now we've got it sewn. The bottom, the top, and the ends are open. We're going to go ahead and turn this, stuff it right on through. Push everything out. Kind of take between my fingers, pull down that seam, pull it with my fingers to kind of iron it out a little bit. On the bottom, all the way out to the edge. Push down through that center, get that together. Now I'm going to go in do the same thing at the top. Now reach in there and make sure you get that top up there all the way, because it tends to hide that nose piece down in there a little bit where you've sewn on. Pull it up, and again, kind of iron it with your fingers, just squeeze it all the way out to the edge, both sides. Make sure it's pushed, that nose piece all the way out again. So we have the basic part now done. The ends, we want to put our elastic in. So we're going to fold this piece in at the end. Just kind of roll it in like that. Pinch it. Now you have that little bit of a seam area tucked inside. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my thread started. And at the very edge up here, we're going to tuck that in. I'm going to make sure that I have that thread on there fairly good. I'm going to take a piece of my elastic here, and I want these to be able to go back and down and around my ears. These pieces here I've cut her a little on the longer side. I want to make sure that I can tuck them in there. Pinch that end piece down. And now I'm going to push this through all the layers, including that elastic. Both sides of the fabric, you can see on both sides and through the elastic. Push that through, snug it down good. I'm going to go back and forth through it. Now the reason I'm not doing the straight stitch by in and out in just one stitch is because I've got so many layers with that elastic in there, and I want to make sure that these stitches are tight together. Back and forth. Most people are going to have approximately 7 to 7.5 inches of elastic from the beginning to where you sew it back in again. That will fit around, about and around their ears. You might want to try yours on a little bit and see if it's better. Different length. So now that I've gotten past my elastic, I can do a couple of things. I can stitch a few more times in there to make sure it's more secure, and that which is probably what I would do, but again, we're going to do this in the interest of time. I'm just going to tuck this in a little bit and just wrap it down around the end. Now, I'm doing this and closing this end. You do not have to. If you want this to be open, simply do your stitching on one side and down so that it keeps the fabric folded under. And that will make it open so you can slide your filter, or if you want to put a filter in there. For me, I'm going to close up this end. So I would have gone back and just do this little slip stitch. And again, in the interest of time, I'm just putting them a little closer or further apart than I normally would. I would normally go a little bit closer. You're just taking a little bit of that fabric, tucking it, and whip stitching it all the way down. We're going to do this to both ends. Again, either close your end completely like I'm doing, leave it at 2 layers, leave one end open, or you can put a filter in there if you'd like, or leave both ends open and just whip stitch down each one. Tuck that seam down in there. Getting close to the other end, just about where I'm getting ready to put my elastic in again. I'm going to take this piece out, keeping it flat down around, turn it so that again it's staying flat, and we're going to tuck this piece in, and we're going to decide how long do we want those ear pieces to be at this point. But if I've cut it, I have no room for adjustment, at least in not making it longer. So that to me looks like it's just about the right length. I'm going to stitch it into place now by again going through all the layers and now back and forth. To keep that in place. Sure I get that elastic well joined. Bring my last piece through and tie it off. Just like that. You have your strap on that end, and we're going to do the same thing on the other end. And that very simple project to do. I'm going to go ahead and tuck this in, and I'm going to leave you with that. You enjoy this project, have fun, make it any size, any type you want, any colors you want. And while I sit back and finish putting the elastic in mine, you enjoy finishing yours also.